Hi, everybody. Welcome to Dead End Street. I'm Al. On this episode, we are going to do the ranking of the 9 modern English records. Um, a really great post-punk group that started in the early 80s. They started on the 4AD label alongside of other great acts like Bauhaus and Cocteau Twins and so on. And the stuff that I like by them, I like a lot. And the records do kind of run the gamut. They have a brand new record out called 1234 that just came out last month. I got to see them about 6 months ago here in Philly. They did an afternoon show. They showcased some of the tunes from that record. Um, and we're going to get to it in a little bit, but let's get started. So, coming in at number 9 is going to be 1996's Everything's Mad. This is a record that is kind of sorta a Robbie Gray solo record. He's the only original member in the group at the time. So we're in the mid 90s, and this is kind of like modern English's attempt at the whole Britpop thing that was soaring in the UK at the time. This is my least favorite of the modern English records. Most groups do have a misstep in their history. I believe this record is a misstep. There's influences from Oasis and Blur and whatnot on this album. I even hear a little bit of Portishead on the track Film One. Overall, it's not my favorite. Um, it's a 2-star record. Coming in at number 8 is the 1990 release Pillow Lips. The group reforms after breaking up in 1987, I believe. They signed with TVT Records, which would lead you to believe that they were going to go in a bit of a more aggressive musical direction, but it seems they go into the foray into the Manchester baggy thing that was going on in the early 90s, which is funny because that's at the same time the shoegaze thing was going on. I think that lane probably would have been not very far off from what modern English was to begin with. So kind of a curious move there. There's a re-recording of I'll Melt With You on this album. I don't think it was necessary. I don't know whether they still think it was a good move or not. The original is better. The title track and Take Me Away, the last 2 songs in the record, are what saves this record for me from being the last one, but it's still a 2-star record. The number 7 record is going to be Stop Start from 1986. So the band moves on from producer Hugh Jones, who they had great success with in the previous 2 records. And you can kind of hear the difference straight away. Instead of hanging in with their post-punk roots, they have a bit of the production on this is much closer to, say, like Glass Tiger or Mr. Mister than maybe Love and Rockets or The Cure or Psychedelic Furs, some of their peers from that same time period. It's truly hard to believe when listening to this that just 5 short years before this is the same group that released Mesh and Lace in 1981. Crazy that you're listening to it, but so you're listening to it, and you hear like a lot of the new wave influences going on, or new wave pop that was going on in 1986. So you have like this track Love Forever, which sounds kind of like a Heaven 17 track, which is kind of a strange place for modern English to be, I would think. It's not a terrible record. It does have a bunch of cringy moments. So it is a little, I do have it a little better than the other two. It's number 7, Stop Start, 2.5 stars. So the number 6 record is going to be 2010's Soundtrack, which is the name of the album, Soundtrack. It's not a soundtrack for a movie as far as I'm aware. So they bring back producer Hugh Jones. Robbie Gray is, I think, still the only original or classic lineup member in the group. However, I was tricked into thinking that Stephen Walker, the original keyboardist, was in the group and had moved to guitar. But upon further review, it's Stephen with a PH versus Stephen with a V. They're two different people. So Modern English had two different Stephen Walkers in the group. Go figure. However, Mr. Walker, the guitarist, actually does a nice job on this record. It's Okay, Lister, Bomb, Here Comes the Failure, all really good tracks on this album. The title track, Call Me, The Lowdown, and Finn are all really good atmospheric type songs that would find a little bit more in line with the early years of Modern English. I really kind of like this record quite a bit. I was surprised by it because I remember listening to it and I don't remember liking it as much as I did this time around. However, I do give it 3.5 stars at number 6. It's Soundtrack. And coming in at number 5 will be their classic lineup reunion from 2016 called Take Me to the Trees. This album is quite a massive step up in songwriting quality and production. So this record brings back Gary McDowell, the classic lineup guitarist, and Mick Conroy on bass, along with the original Stephen Walker, who is the keyboardist, along with Robbie Gray. And the difference is crazy. The title track and Moonbeam are open up to that. They're very cool. I Feel Small is the Modern English light spot on the record, which they were always good for in the early days. Dark Cloud could totally pass for a Killing Joke song. I kid you not. The riff in there is very it has Mr. McDowell sounding quite a bit like Geordie Walker on that album, on that song. But it's a very good record, especially for the band to get reacquainted with each other going forward, because they made another record this past year. So number 5, Take Me to the Trees, 3.5 stars. Number 4 is going to be their brand new record, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to give this one also 3.5 stars. This brings the classic era back together once again. Musically, this album is the closest they've come to their early 4AD days since those days. So you're talking close to 40 years, if not longer. So Long in the Tooth, Crazy Lovers, and I Know Your Soul all had those Modern English trademark attributes in their pop sensibilities. All 4 of those could have been singles. While Exploding, Plastic, Out to Lunch, and Voices show their much darker side. And I got to tell you, Out to Lunch is probably the best song I think they've done in 40 years. Gary McDowell on this album is on fire, and he does a fantastic job. He's such a cool guitarist. Always interesting, whether he's using an acoustic or a shrieking electric guitar or killing it with the EBow. He's one of the best at it, still is. The biggest standout on this record, I think, though, is Mick Conroy's bass playing. You could say it's very Mickey-esque, but I think it would be a bit unfair, considering that he's one of the architects of the post-punk bass sound himself. People forget how long Modern English have been around, and who they were rubbing shoulders with and who their contemporaries were. But I gotta say, this is a really, really good record. Um, I put it up as high up as number 4, which is the highest on this ranking other than the first 3 records. So, and outstanding job. And coming in number 3 is going to be 1984's Ricochet Days, which is the follow-up to the massive After the Snow. I always thought this record deserved a better fate. It always kind of gets this rap for being overly commercial. But listening to it now, I don't think it's really much more commercial than, say, anything that New Order was doing on like Low Life, which was only a year after, or even the Psychedelic Furs were doing on Mirror Moves, which was the same exact year. So it's kind of strange how they kind of got um, skewered for this album when there's really nothing wrong with it. I mean, it's not great, but I mean, there's a lot of really good songs on it and standout moments. Spinning Me Round, I think is the second track. I don't know, but I think that album that should have been the lead-off single off the album instead of Hands Across the Sea. It has a very head on the door kind of feel to it, which is interesting because it predates Head on the Door by at least a full year. Um, and Blue Waves is another highlight on the record, kind of reminiscent of I'll Melt With You. Could have been the attempt of, recreating the magic they had just a couple of years earlier. Heart is a bit epic at 7 minutes long, but it's pretty cool. I mean, it kind of has like a Roxy Music kind of journey feel to it. Not Roxy, a Roxy Music journey, not the group Journey. They don't sound like Journey. But all in all, I think that Ricochet Days is a better record than it's been given credit for over the years. And I have it at number 3, 3.5 stars. My number 2 modern English record is going to be the debut Mesh and Lace. This is a excellent record. This record is much more in line with like their label mates, Bauhaus, or even you can hear a lot of Joy Division isms within the record. Hell, I even hear Hawkwind. I mean, that's how dark and heavy and psychedelic this record is, which most people don't associate those things with modern English. And they should, because in the early days, that's pretty much all they did before I'll Melt With You. So you have the album opener, 16 Days, which they still play live and they still kill it. Complete with audio samples, which was pretty ahead of its time considering this is 1981. Moving Light is an excellent track. There's at the end of the song, Robbie just keeps repeating the line, "Exuberance leads to exhaustion," which I think is such a cool line, and it fits the music perfectly. Grief is an excellent track. Kind of has a Floydian feel to it. Gary McDowell and Mick Conroy, again, really stand out throughout the record. They compensate each other. They complement each other perfectly. The guitar weaving in and out of the bass lines. Black Houses is one of my absolute favorite modern English tracks. I do believe they've been playing that song a couple of nights on their tour, if I remembered seeing that correctly. But if this record included, at the same time, around this time, they had a couple of non-album tracks, one being Gathering Dust and the other being Swans on Glass. Had those two songs been on this record, it would have been a full-on 5-star record. But it's a very solid 4.5 stars. I don't know why this album isn't known more than it is, considering when it came out, who it was released around and what label it was on. You would think it would be talked about in music circles more than it is, and it's not. But an interesting side note about this record, in doing some reading on it, I found a quote from Trouser Press, in their review of the record. And I quote, "This album is a load of monotonous droning and shouting by a precious art band, oppressively weighed down by its self-conscious and 4AD pretensions." And I agree wholeheartedly, and I think that's what makes it glorious. So, Mesh and Lace, number 2, 4.5 stars. So, the number 1 album here is probably not going to be a shock to anybody, but it is After the Snow, the classic 1982 release, known mostly for being the album that contains I'll Melt With You, which is the biggest hit of their career. It kind of gives them that one hit wonder moniker, which I don't even know what that means. I mean, so charts don't really mean anything in the end, but it's great because they probably don't ever have to work again just because of that song if they really wanted to, which is great. So, in my humble opinion, this album is one of the greatest releases in the post-punk era. And saying that for me is kind of crazy because I'm a post-punk nut. I mean, it's my favorite form of music. If I wrote down my top 50 favorite groups, 30 of them would probably be, British groups from the late 70s, early 80s era. So, considering how much I love that era of music, to say that this album is in there with the greatest albums of that time, it means I love this record. I mean, every single song on it is outstanding. There's no filler. Every single note on it belongs where it belongs. Every single lyric is laid perfectly. Um, it starts off with I think it was the lead-off single, also "Someone's Calling." A great new wavy soundtrack. Um, but after that song, it's like it's off to the races. You have "Life in the Glad House," which is just an incredible arrangement for a rock band who supposedly couldn't even play their instruments just a year and a half, 2 years before that. It's outstanding. Richard Brown, the original drummer on this record, um, his drums on throughout the record, but particularly on the track "Face of Wood," are outstanding. The tone of the drums are found fantastic. The production of this record is fantastic. Um, you can hear everything separated perfectly, but yet it all feels like one piece of music. The drums are clear. The guitar you can hear perfectly. The vocals aren't too far out front. It's just Hugh Jones did a fantastic job. Closing out the first side of the record is "Dawn Chorus," which pressed, I would probably have to say that's my favorite modern English song. It's majestic. I think it all everyone's playing on it is fantastic. Robbie's lyrics, I think, on that song are amazing. Stephen Walker's keyboards are incredible. He's got synths laid in the back, up front, and then he's just got some psychedelic piano doodling in the background. The song starts off as one thing, it meanders off into another thing, and brings you back at the end to the first part of the song. It's absolutely beautiful arrangement. It's a great song. And then, of course, there's "I'll Melt With You," which is one of the best pop songs of the 80s, I think, still. And honestly, it sounds even better within the context of the album. I know everyone's sick of it. It was used in Burger King commercials, for Christ's sake. I mean, it's but it's still a great song. The title track again has more of Robbie Gray's fantastic lyrics. "Carry Me Down" has a bit of a proggy type arrangement, but it's way cooler than that and full of nuance. Richard Brown's drums on that one are just tastefully complex, but not to the point of ridiculousness. So, I mean, this to me After the Snow, this is a 5-star record to me. It's flawless to me. Um, in coming around to thinking of doing a modern English ranking, it got me thinking when I heard the new record. I thought it'd be a great time to do it. The downside of that is I'm going to get stuck listening to these two records right here over and over again, because once I start listening to them, I kind of get sucked in. So everyone I live with is going to be kind of sick of modern English for the next couple of days. Look, if you're a fan of all the other 4AD acts and, you know, Bauhaus and Dead Can Dance and Cocktail Twins, or even Joy Division, the Banshees, The Cure, etc., and you've dismissed this band just basically solely on the whole "I'll melt with you" thing, I think you really need to reconsider. I mean, this band is much more than that, and trust me, if you like that stuff, listen to especially the first 2 or 3 records, and then come around to the newer records and work your way back in the middle if you want. But you won't be sorry. So, thank you for joining me again here on Dead End Street. If you like what you've seen today, like, subscribe, press the bell for notifications. All of the social media will be down in the bottom here for you to check out. And see you next time on Dead End Street. Thanks.